my paranormal experiences have been happening most of my adult life. I can't recall a time when I was younger that anything happened. It may have. I don't have those vivid recollections, but I have a few stories for you all tonight that are from my adult life. So if you're all ready for it, I'd like to share those with you now. So the first story I'll share with you all tonight happened to me when I was a younger man, and I'd just moved into my first house, moving out of my parents' place, obviously, and, moving in with a young lady. And yeah, so we moved in. It was all fine. The house, the unit, I should say, seemed really nice. It was a, little 2-bedroom kitchen, bathroom. Now, for this story, I do have to sort of describe the layout. So when you walked in the front door, immediately to your left was the lounge room. And it wasn't a huge lounge room, but it was sort of decent size. And then you would continue maybe 4 or 5 steps into the kitchen. Like if you didn't go in the lounge room and kept walking forward, you would go into the kitchen. Then to the left was a short hallway. Down this hallway, you could see directly into what was the spare room. Off the hallway ran a laundry. You go around a little bit to your left was the water closet, and also the second bedroom, which sat next to the main bedroom, which sat next to the spare room there. So we lived there for a few months, not a problem. And one day, the girl I was seeing, her nephew came over. He was 5 years old, I think. And look, he was acting up as young kids tend to do. This unit also was on stumps. In Australia, some older homes are built on either timber or concrete stumps, and they're raised up, so there's room underneath the house. So I jokingly said to him, if you keep being naughty, you keep doing the wrong thing, I'm going to throw you under the house. And he jokingly was like, yeah, go on, do it. So I opened the trap door underneath and put him under the house and closed it, and fully expected him to start crying and I'd let him out immediately and sort of lesson learned. But no, he stayed under there. So directly under there was where the second bedroom was, so the spare room. So anyway, I went into the spare room and I used my right foot to tap on the floor 3 times, sort of and he underneath tapped back 1, 2, 3 times. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go and get him now. So I went under there, opened the door, said, look, come out. That's enough, And look, he called my bluff, so good luck to him. So anyway, that was fine. And nothing else was thought about it until maybe a week later. And I was home by myself. The spare room is where we had the computer set up, like a sort of a study type setup, if you like. And so I was in there by myself, no one else at home. And yeah, I'm just doing my thing. And there was 3 knocks from under the floor directly where I was sitting. And I thought, did I just hear that? There is no way that I just heard that. I wasn't sure. So I stopped what I was doing and I turned my head, listening. And sure enough, there it was, 3 more knocks from underneath the house on the wooden timber floor. 3 more knocks. Now, I still don't know why I did this because I immediately got frightened, but without even thinking about it, I, again, used my foot to tap on the floor 3 times in response to the knocking that was coming from under the floor. Now, as I said, this was probably 9:30 at night time. There was no one under the floor. There was no reason for anybody to be under the floor, under the house. If there was, I would certainly know about it. But there was nobody. So anyway, and as soon as I tapped again, 1, 2, 3, again came the repeat knocks from underneath, 1, 2, 3. And so I ran out of the room and went into the lounge room. And I was like, okay, calm down. Let's be normal here. Let's think clearly. That did not just happen. There's no such thing as ghosts. Your mind's playing tricks on you. Man up and stop thinking ridiculous things, So anyway, that was fine. I put the television on, watched some sport, and went to bed and thought nothing else of it. But the funny thing was that after that, I started seeing a person, a shape, if you like, in my peripheral vision, always down the hallway. Whenever I was in that room for the next few weeks, I would see in my peripheral vision, as I said, looking down the hallway, there was a person standing in the kitchen. And whenever I looked, nothing there. Now, one little detail that I did leave out, sort of important, sort of not, we had a dog. Now, this dog, after this started occurring, this dog would go off its tree, bark, 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 looking at the corner of the lounge room, looking towards the kitchen, just bark, 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 barking its head off. And we used to say, all right, stop, that's enough, calm down. And the dog would calm down, but quite often she would start going off her tree, barking in that fashion. So I worked mainly at night time. One night I was out at work, and we're talking maybe, I used to get home around 5 a.m. in the morning. So my partner called me up, and she was a bit hysterical at this point, and she said, I think there's somebody in the house. And I said, that's ridiculous. There's nobody in the house. This was like maybe 1 o'clock in the morning at this point when she called me. She said, yes, look, I can hear heavy laboured breathing coming from the toilet. And I'm like, that's crazy. That can't be. She's like, yes, I'm telling you. I said, all right. I said, you've looked all around the house. There's nobody. Nothing's happening. She's like, yes. I said, okay, the dog hasn't let you know that someone's in the house. Surely the dog would have done that. The doors were all locked. The windows were locked. I said, there's no way someone can be in the house. So I sort of dismissed it. But at the same time, the urgency in her voice told me that something wasn't right. So I left work a little bit early and got home. Now, when I got home, I walked in, I went down the hallway, and she said to me, look, go to the door of the toilet and listen and tell me what you hear. And I promise you all that I put my hand on the door handle and was, like, I'm going to open this door and dispel all this stuff. And there was somebody with heavy laboured breathing, like they had asthma or maybe sort of struggling to breathe, like, and their breathing sounded, or the breathing that was coming from the other side sounded very, as I said, laboured and even bubbly, if you like there was water in the lungs. Like, this person was really, 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 or whatever was breathing was really struggling to breathe. And yeah, I'm not going to lie. I did not turn that door handle, and I said, nah, I'm not looking at this. We'll deal with it in the morning. And I went to bed. We both went to bed, and in the morning got up, opened the door, nothing in there, no one in there, obviously. More often, I was seeing a person in my, peripheral vision, or when you're just walking around the house, you'd see something, you look, and it's no longer there. So it was really starting to sort of affect me. I was, frightened. I didn't want to stay in the house by myself. I'm not ashamed to say that. But, it was quite scary. So we were renting. So I went to the owner of the house and I asked them, I said, look, has there been anything occur in this house? Is there a history of any violence? I don't know. I was just looking for any sort of information as to what may be causing this. And yeah, she said, no, there was nothing. There was no issues, nothing she knew of. And I also didn't want to divulge all the information I had because I didn't want her to think I was a nut job. So she said nothing. So I was like, okay, back to square one. And the piece de resistance to this story happened probably 3 or 4 days later. It was not winter time, so we get cold winters, but we also have quite hot summers. So this was not winter time at all. It was, I think, the middle of spring, maybe the end of spring. So the warmer weather had well and truly started to arrive. And we were laying in bed. We'd just sort of gone to bed, laying there. And the door to the room opened. It it's an older place, so it made a little bit of a creak, and I was like, oh, what's that? And the door opened. It certainly wasn't the dog, because the dog was already with us, laying at the end of the bed, as she used to do. And the dog ears pricked up as well. And what happened now is just still to this day amazes me, and still, gets the hair on the back of my neck standing up. The entire room turned cold, freezing cold, where you can see the breath come out of your breath come out, when it's really cold, and you can see that smoke, sort of, if you want to describe it as that, appear. That's what was happening. It was freezing cold suddenly. And then the door opened even further. And right now I was freaking right out. The dog didn't want to know about it. She sort of came up closer to where we were. She wasn't barking or anything now. She was scared. And my partner, she grabbed hold of my hand under the blanket, what's going on? And I did the only thing that I could think of. And I said, listen, whoever's there, you're scaring us. We don't want to talk to you. Can you please go away? You've been scaring us for a couple of months now. Please go away. We don't want to talk to you. And within 20 seconds, the air in the room, or the chill in the air, disappeared back to normal. And after that, we did not have any other incidences. There was no more taps on the floor, no more breathing. We didn't see anybody. The dog calmed right down. She never again started barking. And that was, that one sort of ended, and we moved it out maybe 6 months later. So, as I said, when I retell that story, I still feel still get some goosebumps and stuff. So, yeah. So for the next story, this one happened around the same time. As I said, I was working nights and working in security, different things. And this one time we were working, myself and another guy, we were on a site that was getting renovated. So there was a lot of big, heavy machinery and such. And it was a heritage site. So with our heritage sites here, you can't destroy buildings or anything that has significant cultural heritage, or the building may have been there for hundreds of years, so that has to be preserved. But the rest of the work that was continuing around, they were building, I can't remember what they were building, but they were building something commercial. It wasn't residential housing or anything, it was commercial. And obviously they had to have security there at night time, so nobody would come and steal building materials. They wouldn't try and steal the heavy machinery, that sort of thing. Now, we had 2 portable buildings. One was where we would sit and sort of talk crap, basically, me and the other guy. And there was also portable toilets across the way. You had to go outside, walk across, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 meters, and then there was the toilets. Now, this other guy had told me that he had seen a lady dressed in colonial type dresses and such. Now, I was like, okay, whatever. This lady, how do I describe colonial? In Australia back in the 1800s, there was a lot of British, obviously, who came over and, and colonized the place. So the way that they dressed, they still dressed that way when they first arrived here. So, and we just call it colonial style, if you like, just to describe that period of dress. Sort of similar to you Americans, think similar to the Wild West, bonnets, those big, wide dresses, that sort of thing. So, anywho, we're sitting there one night, and this other guy's got a can of Coke sitting there. He's drinking his Coke. I was on my phone. He says to me, "Hey, where's my Coke gone? You took it." I said, "I didn't touch anything. What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, you took my Coke." And, it disappeared. I said, "I didn't touch your Coke." So he's accusing me of it. No worries. I didn't touch it. Then that was fine. It reappears somewhere else a few minutes later. He's like, "Oh, good one. You moved it. Ha ha, very funny." And I'm pleading my innocence. I said, "Man, I didn't touch it. What are you talking about?" And so then he started freaking out. He's like, "Oh, it's the ghost that's moved it," and all the rest of it. I'm like stirring him up, saying, "Yeah, ooh, scary." And then, as I said, the portable toilets across, the lights had been turned off. I turned them off myself. he says to me, "Hey, why didn't you turn the lights off in the toilets?" I said, "I did." He said, "No, you didn't." And we looked out the window and they were on. And then I started getting very worried because I know that I turned them off. And he said to me, "Well, go and turn them off." I said, "I'm not going to turn them off. You come with me." He goes, "I'm not going outside." So we both sat there, two grown men, sat there like little children saying, "You go, you go, you go." And yeah, so those toilet lights stayed on that night. The next night, again, there was more shenanigans. We'd turn the lights off, close doors, they would open, what have you. And finally, I did get a look at this lady. She was standing. As I said, there was an original heritage building on the site, and I saw her standing outside. And she was just standing there, holding a baby. And I'm like, am I seeing a person? And no, it wasn't. It was a spirit. She didn't have any feet. So the dress, everything, she was there. She was holding a child, and it was like she was floating. She wasn't touching the ground. She was floating. There was no feet. And I was like, no, I'm not seeing this. So I went inside and convinced myself I didn't see it. And I told the guy that I was working with, he said, "Yeah, that's what I saw as well, because that's exactly what I've seen." And the thing was, the spirit couldn't, like, we were right near this heritage building. So over the nights, we figured out that there's only a certain area that she could go in. She couldn't travel wherever she wanted on the site because she wasn't seen everywhere. But, yeah, it was like maybe there was boundaries she could only go in. But a few other people told me that they had some more sinister interactions from this ghost. I didn't. I can't speak to those with any sort of authority. I can only tell you what I saw. But some others did mention that, yeah, they would smell a really vile smell when it was around, and those sorts of things. There were some others who said that, they had some chains that they were wearing broke off, all sorts of crazy stuff that you'd sort of see in movies. But, yeah, I can't speak with any authority on that. I can tell you, though, that there was a lady holding a baby in colonial dress that was floating around the site, and lights would go on, lights would go off, doors would open, doors would close, and it was quite a scary place to work for the short time that I was there, because it was we used to get moved around a fair bit. So there was the ghost lady at the worksite. We'll call that story. For the next one, this happened one night. I was driving home. I'd been at a friend's place. There was quite a few of us. We'd been playing poker, having a couple of beers, not too many, obviously, as I had to drive. But on my way home, I had to drive through a very remote area. Now, this road goes between two built-up parts of suburbs. So you leave civilization, if you like, and you drive through I think it's about a 3-kilometre stretch. On both sides is farmhouses and wooded areas. Well, as we say in Australia, the bush. And then after you get through that patch, you meet up with civilization again on the other side. Now, I've driven down this road many, many, many times and never experienced anything except kangaroos and the occasional wombat. For those who don't know what a wombat is, you can Google them, but they're little furry animals that just sort of wander around, and if you run one over, it's not good for your car. It's like running into a boulder. They're strong as, and they're not good for you. But yeah, they're nice little creatures. Just wander around at night time, nocturnal. So they're the only things I've seen travelling down this road. As I said, this night I'm coming home in my car. Now I'm driving what the Americans would call a truck. Here we call it a ute. It was quite high. It was raised, like so the car itself had been raised up high, and I had the big wheels on it, and I'm travelling home, listening to music, keeping my eyes out left and right on the side of the road, make sure no kangaroos jump out, because they're the sort of creatures that have no awareness of vehicles. They'll jump straight out in front of you and cause big damage as well. So I'm always looking out to the side of the road, because you'll see them there before they actually jump out. And as I'm coming up to a heavily wooded, it's like a nature reserve. It's on the left-hand side. Now, there's a parking lot, gravel parking lot, a picnic area where they have like some barbecues to use and tables and that sort of stuff. And inside is the wooded area where it's, I think it's like a nature reserve. And yeah, I'm coming up to that and I see something on the side of the road. I couldn't tell what it was. I wasn't sure whether it was crouching down, what it was doing, but it hadn't moved. It was very still. And I'm like, So I slowed down just to make sure it wasn't potentially maybe. Now, kangaroos that we have here in the eastern states of Australia are grey, and they're maybe 6 foot tall maximum. They very rarely get that tall, but they're grey. You can see them. This thing was brown, big, and had more shaggy fur on it, more like you would see on a grizzly bear. Now, I slowed right down, and as I approached it and the headlights lit it up better, I could see that it was definitely humanoid. It was laying down. It had its back towards me. You could see there was arms, legs, and it was sort of laying in the fetal position. And I'm like, And now the car I'm maybe doing 20 kilometers an hour, so I'm going very, very slowly as I roll up to it because I wanted to get a good look at it. And yeah, this thing, as I said, had its back to me. I saw it. I could see it had a head, but I couldn't see the shape of the head. I couldn't see ears or anything. I didn't see the face, but as I said, you could tell that it was humanoid in shape. Now, this thing's shoulders were as high as the bonnet of my car, or as the Americans say, the hood of the car. It was huge. This thing was absolutely massive laying down. Now, I come to a stop right in front of it, and I got a sudden urge, a real, how do I put it into words? Like, I had a sudden urge, like, I should not be here. You cannot be here. That does not belong here. And if you don't get out of here right now, something bad's going to happen to you. And it was like not just that feeling of dread, but it was like, it was sort of like an evil feeling as well. I felt this is really, not right. Everything about this is not right. It's not natural. It's not right. So I started to speed up and I took off, but I had to see the face. So I stopped a little bit up the road and I put my car into reverse so my brake lights would light it up as best I could. It wasn't very good because it was, sort of pitch black. It was about 1 a.m. in the morning. I could see the outline of it. It still had not moved, but I was far too scared and my instincts was telling me, do not get out of this car. Do not approach it. So yeah, I left, but I thought about it the whole way home and I was just thinking. So I got up early the next morning and I drove back there to see if it's roadkill, it's still going to be there, because in Australia, when a kangaroo gets hit or maybe a wombat gets hit, or we do have some deer here as well. If a deer gets hit, they stay on the side of the road, until the council will remove it, but depends how big it is. Generally, they'll leave it there and scavengers will come and do what they've got to do. Foxes and such and birds like crows, they'll peck at it and they'll remove it in the natural fashion, generally. I went back there very early the next morning. This thing was gone. There was nothing there at all. There was no, how do I describe it? Like you could see the indentation, if you like, on the gravel on the side of the road where something had been there, but there was nothing like prints or, you see people who say that they've seen yowies or they've had dogman encounters. They talk about, I saw footprints or I saw this. There was nothing like that. But this thing was definitely not natural. It's definitely not something we get here. We don't have bears at all. We definitely don't have grizzly bears. And yeah, so if I have to categorize it as something, I would say it was a yowie. But again, I couldn't say for certain as I didn't see the face. But this thing was massive and definitely not something you come across. And yeah, it definitely shouldn't have been there. So that yowie experience, or whatever it was. I hadn't told anybody about it for, it was quite a few years before I said anything to anybody, because I thought, they're going to think I'm a lunatic. I did tell my wife, and she didn't think I was a lunatic. So then I told a couple of close friends who also sort of said, okay, well, they didn't know what to sort of make of it or what to do with it, but they didn't dismiss it outright, which was good for me. So that's why I felt comfortable about, sort of coming on to Vic's show here and talking about it there. But close to my scariest experience that I've had, how this all came about was a friend of mine asked me to help him out one day with removing some items that he'd bought from an auction. Now, the auction was done at a mansion. I don't want to mention where the mansion was because a lot of people know it. And this mansion and the grounds were built in the early 1800s. And I think this building has been used for all kinds of things, such as a hospital, a boarding school. I think it might have been used as an asylum or something similar, like a sanitarium back in the day as well. It's had quite a lot of uses over time, but it had been bought by some people who used it as a bed and breakfast. And anyway, so they sold up and everything in there they auctioned off. And so a friend of mine, he knew the people who owned it, and that's why he was originally there. He bought some items and he called me up and he said, look, they're pretty big and burly. Can you give me a hand? I said, no problems. So we go there in the middle of the day. I'd never been inside before. I'd seen the outside. It's a lovely old mansion. And when you go inside, it's just, amazing, beautiful mahogany, massive staircase, high vaulted ceilings. This is on the ground floor. You walk through, like to the left, there's like a huge sitting room. To the right, there's a library. Just anything that you would have seen for architecture built back then, you'll get the gist of what this place looks like. So anyway, we go in, and there's a lot of other people there as well, picking up the items that they'd brought. So my friend, let's call him John, says, come with me. This is where I have to collect the stuff from. So we walk upstairs, and when you go upstairs, it's very different. It branches out into separate wings. Now, the wings have corridors that go down like an L shape. So they a short distance, and then they turn left and right and go into long corridors with rooms either side, left and right. So my friend said, I'm going to go with one of the owners. They went and off and had a chat. He said, go in there and get those huge mirrors off the wall. That we've got to grab that, and there's something else we've got to grab. I said, yeah, no problems. So he walks off having a chat. They disappear. And I go into the room to pick up the mirrors. I had to remove them from the wall. So I was using some power tools, get them off, and gently taking them off the wall. And I could hear other people in other rooms. Obviously, they're in there doing their thing, removing their stuff. So I quickly got them off, stacked them nicely near the door where we had to leave, where we had to exit that room. And then I thought, I think I'll go and have a little look-see around at the mansion since I hadn't been in there before. So I started walking down the hallway, and I'm looking in rooms left, right, and I came to a room which was quite tiny compared to the others. It was obviously used as a bedroom. Now, in this room, there was only one window, which was directly across from the door. So I'll set this up for you as best I can. So I'm walking down the hallway. The room was on my left. The doorway to this room is on the left. I was standing in the doorway. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the window. It's a small window that looks out onto the grounds of this mansion. On the left was a small metal frame bed with no mattress on it. And on the right was 3 pictures, which I hadn't really paid attention to. But what first drew me in was either side of the window was 2 charcoal drawings of 2 young girls. Now, when I say young girls, I don't mean little girls. I mean maybe 14 to, teenage girls. And they looked like, they were from, the maybe dress of the 1800s to the early 1900s. It's the time that they looked in this picture with their what they were wearing. But it was positioned in a way that both of these girls were looking out the window. So the one on the right had her head cocked to the right like she was looking out the window, and the same for the picture on the left. That girl in that picture had her head cocked to the left like she was looking out the window. So I walked into the room, and while I was in there, I didn't know this at the time, but while I'm in there, I couldn't hear anything. But I walked in, no problems, and I was drawn in by these two pictures of these two girls. I walked in, I got in closer, I saw there was the bed there, okay. Looked out the window briefly, looked out over the grounds, and then, okay, no problems. I turned to my right. Now, on my right is where the 3 paintings were. Now, these 3 paintings were stacked in a diagonal fashion. So, top, and then it came down diagonal towards the right. So, a little bit lower in the middle, there was another painting, and then lower to the right again was another painting. And it took up the distance between these paintings was nearly the length of that wall. And they were all positioned. The lowest one was positioned at chest height. The middle one was probably at eye level for me. I'm 6'1". And the one of the extreme left, the one at the top, that was obviously higher, near closer up to the roof of the room. Now, when I looked at them, they initially looked like they were nice biblical depictions. And I looked, and I was like, And I don't know what was making me look at these paintings closer and closer, but it was like it drew me in. That's the only way I can describe it. It drew me in. And when I looked at them closer, I could see that they actually were quite horrific paintings. I can remember the one on the top left. It looked like there was an angel with its arms coming down towards a group of people reaching up towards it. But on closer inspection, I think the angel had a skull face, and the people at the bottom were actually bodies reaching up towards it. It was quite confronting. Like that, I initially saw one thing, but then I'm now looking at something else. And again, as I was saying in the previous experience, where I got that dread feeling come over me, the same thing happened here. I got a feeling of, okay, you're in a position where you shouldn't be. This is not right. It's not natural. You need to get out of this room immediately. But my body, my legs, my arms, nothing would work. My brain saying, get out, get out, get out. You have to get out of here. But nothing would move. My legs wouldn't move, as I said. My arms wouldn't move. And I got I was frightened. I was scared. And I had a feeling that if you don't get out of this room, you're going to die. Get out of this room right now. You're not meant to be here. You're here where you're not wanted, and you're here where you are not supposed to be. And as I said, when I first walked into the room, I couldn't tell that I couldn't hear anything else. At this point, all I could hear in my head was, get out, get out, get out. And it's at that point that something brushed behind me and touched me behind me. And it was like that was the release, if you like. It was like then suddenly my legs and arms would move, and I left, and I almost ran out of the room. And when I got just on the other side of the threshold of that room, of that doorway, and got into the hallway, then it was like I could hear noise again. And that's when I could hear the people suddenly talking. It was like a light went on, that suddenly I realized that I didn't have any hearing while I was in this room. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear the people talking across the hall. I couldn't hear the people in the other rooms. But as soon as I got into that hallway, I could hear them. And that was also frightening. And I looked to my left, and then my friend came around the corner, and he's like, "Where have you been?" He goes, "I've been looking for you." And the whole time I was standing in this room. And he said that he didn't know where I was, and he'd been looking for me for a good 10 minutes. it certainly didn't feel like I was in the room for 10 minutes or anything like that. I walked in, as I described, I looked out the window, I looked at these pictures, and maybe for 30 seconds I had this thing, you cannot be in this room, get out, get out, get out. That seemed to me to last about 30 seconds. Yeah, and then I got out and he said he was looking for me, couldn't find me. So that was extremely frightening episode. So I told my friend about it. I said, this is what happened. And he started laughing, not laughing in a mocking manner, but he was sort of, okay, let's tell the owners about it. So I told the owners and they said, what room were you in? I said, I don't know. I described the room and they said, oh, okay. They said, most of the other ghostly activity, if you like, has come from another room just down the hall on the same side. And they said there's people who have stayed in those rooms in the past have also said that there's been some paranormal activity, if you like, and they have reported it. But, that was probably the scariest thing that has happened to me. Even though I said before I was frightened in other stories, this one was made me think that there was something evil in the room with me and wanted to do me some harm. That's the first time I've actually felt that way. So, yeah, there's that one. The house I currently live in, I've only been here 2 years. This house was built brand new. My wife and I and our son were the only people who have ever lived in this house. So how the next things unfold, I don't know why. Maybe it's something attached to myself, or maybe it's was on the grounds beforehand, because a lot of this around here was farmland. We live in a rural area, and it was farmland before it was split up by the developers and made into residential housing. So that's the only other thing I could put it down to. But okay, so in the new home, things were going great. When my son was born, he used to sleep in the bed with my wife. So I with my work schedule, I was moved to the spare room. And so I had been sleeping in the spare room. And a couple of times I had heard someone in the hallway while I'm in bed at night time. I heard someone in the hallway. I called out to my wife, is that you? No answer. Fine. Just didn't think too much of it. It was obviously my wife, maybe, up and about. Maybe the baby was awake. Who knows? Then there was a time not long after that where I started seeing, I'd hear the walking, if you like, on the carpet in the hallway. Someone was in the hallway just outside the door of the spare room. And then because I started leaving the light on in the hallway so I could get up and use the water closet in the middle of the night without bumping into things, I saw a shadow of someone approach the doorway and then go away. And that was like, okay, that has to be my wife. So I jump up. I remember when I saw that first time, I jumped up out of bed and had a look. Nobody. So for me to get out of bed, take one step to the doorway, there's no way that a person could remove themselves and hide that quickly. They couldn't do it. Plus, there wouldn't be someone in the house without me knowing about it, as everything was locked up. So I was like, okay, geez, that scared me. But just to set my mind at ease, I went to our room to see if it was my wife. Maybe she was up and about, but no, her and my son were there sleeping away. So again, felt a bit weird, but tried to put it to the back of my mind. I go back to bed, and the next night I'm sleeping and the blankets get tugged, and I'm half awake, pulled up the blankets, back up, sleeping. Then a little bit more harder, there's a tug of the blankets. Bang, they go off. Like, not off, but, a good meter went from my shoulders down to almost my waist. I'm like, okay. The blankets, the heavy part of the blankets have obviously fallen over the end of the bed, and that's why that happened. I was now wide awake, and I pulled the blankets back up to myself and tried to go back to sleep. And this happened maybe 3 or 4 nights in a row, the tugging of the blankets. And after the fourth night, I was now very, very worried. I knew that there was obviously something not right. Now, around this time, a friend of mine came over because he hadn't been over to the house yet. He came over and, we had a few beers, had a barbecue, had some food, and, he stayed over because he couldn't drive home. So he stayed in the spare room. The next morning, he got up and he said to me, he goes, "I'm never staying at your place again." I said, "Why?" He told me, he said, "I keep the door open when I sleep." He closes the door. He said, "I heard knocking on the bedroom door." He goes, "Initially I thought it was you, so I opened it." And I said, "Mate, why would I get up and knock on your door for? I've got better things to do. It's not like we're young blokes anymore. We don't do that sort of stuff." So he's like, "Yeah, okay, cool." He goes, "The other thing was somebody was calling my name." And I said, "No way." He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm telling you." He goes, "There was a girl's voice and she was calling my name and it was knocking at the door." I said, "Well, I've never experienced that," but I told him what happened with the tugging of the blankets, and also I'd seen a shadow in the hallway. And he told me, he goes, "The blankets got tugged down." And I said, okay, something's going on here. So we sort of both didn't talk about it anymore. He went home. I told my wife, but gave her the shorter version because she gets very worried about these things. So, I try not to scare her too much. I still had to sleep in that spare room. So now I was worried. But nothing happened. I didn't hear any knocking. There was nobody calling my name. Nothing like that. A couple more times, maybe once a week, once every 4 or 5 days, the tugging of the blankets would occur, or I'd hear someone in the hallway shuffling about. But it was nothing sinister, so I didn't really think too much about it. It wasn't bothering me. I slept, and that was that. But one night, I woke up, and there was the pulling of the blankets. I pulled them back up. I went back to sleep, or tried to go back to sleep. And as you're sort of half awake, I sort of woke up and felt, as people talk about, sleep paralysis, but I wasn't sleeping. And there was something that had pinned me down and was sitting on my chest. Now, as I said, I'm 6'1". I weigh about 100 kilos. Always worked with my hands and that sort of stuff. I'm a fairly strong dude, but I could not move. Something was pinning me down, and I don't know what it was. It was very scary, obviously. I couldn't move. As I said, my arms, my legs, nothing, and the weight felt that was on my chest. It lasted about 30 seconds, and then it was like, just suddenly it was gone, and then I could move. Now, by this stage, I'm wide awake. I've been, fighting something that's obviously sitting on me and flailing about, if you like. So I was pumped. I was awake. My arms were pumped, my legs, everything. Blood was pumping through my body. And I started looking around. I was quite angry, actually. If you've ever been in a situation where you feel like somebody's attacked you, or you've noticed maybe, if anybody has been robbed, heaven forbid, but if you have and you feel that violation, that's how I felt. I felt, I was very angry. I was ready to, physically do something, but obviously there was nothing there. And from that point, I said to my wife, we have to do something here. There's obviously I didn't want to frighten her, as I said before. There's obviously something in the house, and we're getting to a stage now where it's obviously escalating. So my wife suggested we get somebody in, and we had a priest come in and did a cleansing. We walked around the house, and in every single corner, we cleansed the house, even outside. We did it inside, we did it outside, and after that, it seemed to do the trick. Absolutely nothing. I certainly didn't have that, felt like I was attacked anymore. There was no tugging of the blankets. I haven't heard anybody in the hallway since, and the house seems fine. So, I suppose a little lesson to people, even if you build a brand new house, have a cleansing, because you never know. And that's the end of that. Okay, the final one I have for you today happened in Austin, Texas in 2018. This is the second most recent encounter. My wife and I, before our son was born, we travelled. My wife's brother lives in the States, so we travelled out to America to visit him and see a few sites. And while we were travelling around, we went to Texas. Love Texas, great place. And we were staying in a hotel that was right near a highway. It doesn't really matter, but that's where we were staying. So we go in first night, and it was the American summer, stinking hot in Texas. We had the air conditioner going all the time, obviously, when we tried to sleep. And the room was just a standard room. It had your double bed. There was the air conditioner, which was on my side, sort of on the floor under the window. There was a bathroom to the right-hand side, bathroom and toilet, and then to the left of that was the door to get in. Now, we were on the second floor of this hotel. Now, the first night, it was fine. We both woke up a lot because the air conditioner kept going off. And I thought, okay, this is just some dodgy maintenance going on here. It's not good. So what I would do, get up without 3/4 asleep still, just get up and absent-mindedly turn the cooling back on, and I'd go back to bed. The second night, the same thing happened again, and I thought to myself, you know what, I'm really going to tell the hotel staff about this tomorrow. This is not good enough, because you'd wake up, I didn't know how long it had been off, you just wake up really hot. So I woke up and looked, I don't know why, I was more awake this time. I didn't get up and turn the aircon back on. I just looked at the end of the bed, and at the end of the bed was a person, I would say a man, but zero facial features, totally black. He was wearing an overcoat. Again, no features, but you could see the silhouette, an overcoat, and he was wearing a hat. And that's why I say he, because he was dressed as a male would. And I looked and I was like, nah, I'm not seeing that. That's rubbish, and go back to sleep. So I did. Now, my wife, as I said, is very, very sort of, she don't want to hear any of these stories. She gets scared very easily, doesn't want to hear about anything paranormal, or she doesn't even like watching scary movies. So I'm like, okay, I'm not telling her anything about it at all. We wake up in the morning, and my wife was a bit weird in the morning. I said, yeah, right. She's like, yeah, I'm okay. So we go to breakfast, and I thought to myself, should I tell her or should I not tell her? I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell her. I'm not going to say anything. And we come back to the hotel room, and we were getting ready, had a shower, getting dressed for our day of sightseeing. And she said to me, she said, I saw something last night. And I said, did you? She said, yes. She said, I saw a man at the end of the bed wearing an overcoat and a hat. And I swear the blood drained from my face. I was like, no, you didn't. She said, yes, I did. She said, I woke up and I saw him there, but I put it to the back of my mind and I went back to sleep. And I was like, all right, that's ridiculous. And I told her that I saw the exact same thing. So we went down and saw the staff and asked if we could move rooms. They said they're all booked up. So we only had one more night in there anyway. And that night there was nothing. Nothing happened. There was no aircon going off, or we didn't see anything else. But, the fact that we both saw the same thing, and it was quite frightening, like, waking up and seeing this silhouetted person at the end of the bed. And we both, I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe it's a dream, maybe, who knows, go back to sleep. But the fact that my wife said she saw the exact same thing as well, we were both quite dazed by that one. So, that was the Austin ghost, as we'll call that one. And that's all I've got for you tonight. So thanks very much for indulging me, all of you. And, I hope that my paranormal experiences have been some great stories for you.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.